All right, welcome back again to another crypto Q&A. As every presentation and every content we produce, we have to start with a disclaimer. Nothing that we produce is to be considered financial, legal, or tax advice. With that being said, let's go to the next slide. And again, this crypto Q&A happens every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, again, the disclaimer, no financial or tax advice. And as everyone in the crypto space is known for some sort of expertise or knowledge, I am known as a risk-averse guy. And the reason why is because I don't like risks. I have a very strong aversion to risk. And if there's a doubt on a project, there's no doubt I don't go forward, I don't invest. And today we're going to be talking about the United States of America debt ceiling. So this is the topic of today. And we're going to be covering the answer to the following questions. What is the debt ceiling? How does it work? What is the goal of the debt ceiling, its goal? And why is it important now? Or why does it matter now? And what we can expect? And then the first question, what is the debt ceiling? And again, the debt ceiling is the maximum amount of money that the US Treasury can borrow, or in other words, the maximum amount of debt that the US government can have in a numerical fashion. So, and how's it done? How does it increase? What needs to happen for it to increase? The debt ceiling can only be increased by Congress, and that's why it's being on the headlines right now. So the president has no say, he has a say, but he doesn't have the possibility to approve the debt ceiling. Only Congress can do that. So that's one way it's done. And of course, the government borrows money to pay basic things, Social Security, Medicare, and of course, the interest on the debt, which is important. We're going to be covering more of that later, and other payments. So if the government cannot increase its debt, it cannot borrow more, then they can pay for their bills. The more borrow money, the more debt they have. So the way that they borrow money is basically by issuing IOU, which we know as bonds. So when the government issue a bond, that bond is a promise of payment, and that bond will be subject to the interest rate of the market. So if Congress doesn't allow the US government to issue more bonds or more IOUs, then they cannot increase the debt. And so one way to look at the debt ceiling, if you forget all about bonds, forget about all the fancy financial language, it is the limit on the credit card of the government. So every person who has a credit card has a credit card limit. Your credit card limit is your debt ceiling for that credit card. So one way, if you don't understand about debt ceiling, just think of is the limit on the credit card of the government. That's pretty much it. Now, what is the goal? Why we need to increase? That's what we're covering now. The goal, of course, with the approval of the increase of the debt ceiling, is to rescue the American government from the mountain of debt that the government managed to bury themselves in. So that's the main goal, is to rescue the US government, because if they don't pay their bills, then they become bankrupt and the trust on the government is gone. So we're going to be seeing that as we see the next slide. So once the government defaults, which means, so one example, right? When you don't pay your electrical bill, they cut your electrical utility. You don't have electricity. If the government defaults, the trust on the government is going to be shaken. So, and what happened is, if you see the bond as IOU from the government, and the government tries to get more loan, more credit, whenever you take a loan, there's one thing called interest rate. And the interest rate on your loan depends on how good is your credit. So if your credit is not as good, you're going to be paying higher rates. And one good example of that is, for instance, for people who cannot have a good credit and be able to borrow from the bank, they normally borrow from Shylocks. And of course, the interest rate of the Shylock is much higher because it's a higher risk. So once the trust on the government is shaken, the interest rate will automatically go up regardless of what the Federal Reserve does. So the government needs to borrow more in order not to default, because if the government defaults, the trust on the government is going to be shaken and the interest rate will go up regardless of what the Federal Reserve does. So, and why is it important now? Why you're talking about the debt ceiling right now on the past few weeks on the headlines? Is because it has been increased only 89 times since 1959. So basically in the past 60 some years, the debt ceiling has been increased 89 times. And as you can see here, it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican, the debt ceiling has been increased. And it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republicans, they will continue printing more money. So you can see here, each triangle is one-time increase. And what you have on the bottom is the colors of the political parties of the US. So when blue matches blue, is the same president of the same political party with the same Congress, the same thing for when it's red and red. But what's happening now is the following. You have Biden, which is a Democrat, and you have a leader on the Congress, which is Republican, as you're going to be seeing on the next slide. So this is the guy, he's Kevin McCarthy. He is the one running the United States House of Representatives, also known as the Congress, and he has the power to decide what's going to happen. So only he can decide yes or no for the increase on the debt. So if you guys want to see, go to Wikipedia. This is his Wikipedia page. And the last time that they increase, they waited until the last minute. And the last minute this time is in June. So by June, the debt has to be increased. The issue that I have been talking about a few weeks ago, is because what happened is they are already touching that ceiling way before June. They have been touching that ceiling since last month. But this is when it was increased the last time. And you can see here, it went on a very steep spike on COVID on 2020. But as you can see, it has always been going up. It never goes down. So this is a graph. And again, this is from the Federal Reserve themselves. So, and if you want to see the numbers, here you have the number. This is actually a website called the US Debt Clock. And it's only, by the time we took the print screen, was only at 31.5 trillion. I know there's a lot of digits there, but it's 31.5 trillion when we took the screen. And that's the ceiling right there. It's 31.5. So, and why it's important is because as they're touching the debt ceiling, another thing that's happening is the balance on their account is going down. So you see the balance on the account. So you can see here this zigzag line. You can see in 2020, the Federal Reserve increased the balance for the government on how much they could spend. That was the balance on their bank account. But right now, that balance is just above, and again, by the time we took this screenshot, it was just above 400 billion. I know 400 billion sounds like a lot for a lot of people, but for the US government, that is like a week or two, maybe a few hours, depending on what expenses they have. So we have an example of how little is 400 billion. Just the maintenance of the loan on the last quarter of last year was 850 billion. Again, they never pay the debt, they pay the interest. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, so for instance, let's say I took a loan of 1,000 from Mia, and let's say my maintenance is 10% a month. That means every month I give her 100. That 100 is not diminishing my debt, it's just preventing from going up by the interest rate. So that's the maintenance of the debt on the last quarter last year was 850 billion, which is more than double of what they have right now on their bank account balance. And here we go. The deficit is already at 460. And the deficit is, of course, a difference than your debt. Your debt is how much we spend. Your deficit is if you make $3,000 and your expenses every month is $3,500, you have a 500 deficit. Deficit is the difference between how much you make and how much you spend. And that difference is already on 406 billion, which is the precise balance on the bank account. So, and the other issue is if the debt ceiling gets approved to be increased, that means the US government can spend more, and spending more, we're going to have more inflation. And Jerome Powell is like, I need to stop inflation. We need to bring the inflation down. Interest rate has to go up. So, and again, if the last year, just the interest maintenance was 850 billion, when Jerome Powell says, I'm going to be increasing the interest rates, that means that 850 billion will no longer be able to cover the debt. So, or no, sorry, the maintenance of the debt. And of course, higher rates, if the interest rate goes up in a higher rates environment, a higher debt ceiling will equal a higher interest payment or a higher maintenance of that debt. And the other issue is, historically speaking, we have never seen evidence that you can forever increase your debt. It is like saying you can drink yourself to sobriety, right? Oh, I'm too drunk. Just keep on drinking, you're gonna get sober. That's pretty much what they're doing here. The debt is too high, the interest is too high. I'll just take another loan. Eventually that doesn't work. So it reaches a point where it breaks. So one way to look at American government, not just American government, government in general, is to look at zombie companies definition. And when you talk about a zombie company, it's a company that earns, but in this case, because it's a government, they don't earn, they don't produce anything. You can see the government as a company that borrowed just enough money to continue operating and servicing the debt, and they're never going to be able to pay their debt. So basically, the US government and many governments around the world, if not all of them, they're just zombies. Zombie company, high debts, check. Cannot reduce the principal on the debt, check. Mainly rely on bailout. You can put the debt increase as a bailout, check. Too many undermine recovery, check. Depends on low interest rate, check. And can barely service their debt, check. So the American government can just be seen as a zombie company. So what can we expect between now and June? That's the things we're going to be looking at. So they're going to increase this debt ceiling. I don't think they're not going to do it. So once they do it, you're going to be experiencing more inflation. And we're going to continue to see an increased conflict between the interests of Jerome Powell, which is to preserve the US dollar, and the interests of Biden, which is to get reelected and to continue to increase the debt ceiling. So you can't increase the debt ceiling without increasing inflation. Jerome Powell is against inflation. So if they approve the debt ceiling to be increased, Jerome Powell is going to have to bring the interest rates. And that's going to be a self-fulfilling loop where interest rates are going to have to go up and the service of the debt is going to become higher, and then eventually it's going to be a breaking point. So that's what we're going to be seeing. And again, this is supposed to happen before June. I think it will happen way before June. I don't think they're going to wait for the last minute because they already surpassed their debt ceiling. So they need money today. So, and again, they're not going to be able to increase that ceiling forever. We are experiencing a breaking point. So, and if interest rates continue to go up, also more banks are going to go bankrupt. So we cover what is that ceiling, how is it done, what is the goal, why is it important now, or why does it matter now, and what we can expect. So without that, I finished the presentation. Let's just remember everyone that next Wednesday, if you're watching this on Facebook, next Wednesday is our last Wednesday broadcasting this on Facebook. From the next Wednesday, the 20th of March, we're going to be broadcasting this on YouTube directly. So remember to contact us if you need more education, more information. We are in Clubhouse Monday to Friday, 2 hours a day. You can also find us on our YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook. And with that,